The 2009 edition of More Than a Carpenter was written by Josh McDowell and his son Sean McDowell. The book speaks to a Jesus who is more than a historical figure. That Jesus is who he claimed to be. Jesus is the Son of God and is God. If we believe this claim, then it will have a significant impact on our lives at several levels. As an overview, the book is written well and is approachable. The author presents their faith journey and their testimony in an engaging way that makes you want to read more. Chapter 1 covers the events that led Sean from living without hope with anti-religion views. He is despondent about religion and its rules for life. At university, one of his Christian friends challenges him to investigate the foundations of Christianity. Now, Sean is a law student, so he believes he is up for the challenge. This is where Chapter 1 ends. Chapter 2 takes us into the idea that Christianity is a religion that is fundamentally based on a person, Jesus Christ. It is key to Christianity that Jesus is divine, that he is God. The book shows how the people of Jesus' time and Jesus himself claims to be the Messiah. The chapter explains some of the nuances of these claims and gives plenty of biblical references. In Chapter 3, we are led to the conclusion that since Jesus himself is considered a moral teacher, and he also claims to be divine in nature, this leads us to believe that Jesus is God. Otherwise, we'd have to claim that he was a liar or a lunatic. McDowell draws on several sources which denounce the notion that Jesus could have been either of these. If Jesus was a liar, then the rest of his teachings come into disrepute, and we would have to explain his chosen death by crucifixion. If he is a lunatic, then even by quoted psychologists, he was an incredibly stable lunatic. Chapter 4 briefly highlights the point that science is not against religion, and that science is a tool that does not have a monopoly on human knowledge, nor experience. Historical and legal knowledge being an example that science cannot house. Chapter 5 introduces us to some of Josh McDowell's ideas to do with the rise of new atheism. He shows us that this new atheism is really old atheism, just given new proponents. The new atheists claim atheism is backed by science. They claim the universe arose out of nothing and developed chaotically from random events. They call for a trust in scientific discovery, while ignoring the problems that come from this philosophy. Notably, if our minds are based on chaotic events, then how can we trust what we think and the science that we develop? McDowell then briefly covers the anthropic principle and how it supports the idea of a creator. The new atheists claim Christianity is morally bankrupt, while not realizing atheism is missing the moral foundations required to objectively judge other beliefs. The ills of Christianity are often overemphasized and the triumphs underemphasized or forgotten altogether. Then, when we actually compare the history of Christianity to its ideal, being the person Jesus Christ, we see a condemnation of many of those ills anyway. The Bible even predicts that this would occur. Ultimately, science is a useful tool, but if all you use is a hammer, then all your problems start to look like nails. Chapter 6 looks at the biblical text itself and critiques it based on 3 tests of legitimacy: bibliographical, internal evidence, and external evidence. The bibliographical test asks the question, how do we have the texts we have today if we don't have the original manuscripts? McDowell found that the Bible has been robust in its transmission from the source to the Bible we have today. This is especially so when compared to other ancient texts. We can be confident that the Gospels were written within 30 years of Jesus' crucifixion. This is within the lifetimes of eyewitnesses and contemporaries. Any modern attacks on the accuracy of the Bible as it stands today are based on poor scholarship. The internal evidence test looks at the events in the text and tries to find inconsistencies and challenge by hostile eyewitnesses. In the case of the Gospels, the disciples of Jesus routinely challenged their contemporaries, calling them out about the things they had seen and knew from current events. These challenges went uncontested. The consistency and details of the Gospel of Luke is a testament to the historical accuracy of the biblical writers. Luke's account has been shown to be accurate again and again. The last test is the external evidence test. This test checks the accuracy of the Bible with evidence outside of the Bible. Archaeological evidence has continually supported the biblical account. We have long, unbroken lineages of disciples from Apostle John, Peter, and Paul. These lineages survive to at least the Counts of Laodicea in 350 AD. If we are to scrutinize the Bible as we do secular texts, then we find the Bible to be outstanding. Chapter 7 challenges the idea that Christianity is based on a conspiracy of Jesus' disciples. Of the 12, half of them end up being crucified, and only one died a natural death. The perspective I often hear is, well, these men died for a lie. Many people have done that, so what does it prove? Yes, many people have died for a lie, but they did so believing it was the truth. What was the case with the disciples? If the resurrection had not happened, obviously the disciples would have known it. I can find no way that these particular men could have been deceived. Therefore, they not only would have died for a lie, here's the catch, but they would have known it was a lie. It would be hard to find a group of men anywhere in history who would die for a lie if they knew it was a lie. It is astronomically unlikely that a conspiracy of 12 people could maintain its integrity, especially in the face of open persecution. Chapter 8 and 9 calls out the inversion theme that we see in Christianity. Chapter 8 speaks of the Messiah that Jesus is, compared to what was expected at the time. The Jews were expecting a conquering king, someone who would free them from Roman oppression. So it is unexpected that Jesus would fulfill prophecy in the way he did. Chapter 9 recounts Saul's conversion from strict Jewish practices to Christianity. Saul was the most unlikely person to have converted. He had grown up and trained in Jewish law his entire life and openly, vehemently persecuted Christians. When he meets Jesus in a vision while on the road to Damascus, he converts to Christianity and changes his name to Paul. Apostle Paul's conversion is another key evidence for the transformative effect of meeting Jesus. Chapter 10 wrestles with several theories that have tried to disprove the death and resurrection of Jesus. Some of these theories have been popularized in recent times. McDowell briefly covers the most common theories and convincingly debunks them. The evidence for the death and resurrection of Jesus is then covered. Chapter 11 shows us the multitude of prophecies from the Old Testament that point to the person Jesus as being the Messiah. Many of these prophecies were written hundreds of years before Jesus was born. We know this because we have manuscripts of the Old Testament that date that far back. McDowell covers a sizable portion of these prophecies with biblical references, and then emphasizes the likelihood that the life of one person in history could satisfy those prophecies. Chapter 12 takes us down the soteriological lane and explains why Jesus is the only path to salvation. If we are to transgress against an infinite being, the price to be paid is infinite, and the only person that can pay it is the entity itself. Forgiveness is never free, someone always has to pay. If someone transgresses and is forgiven, that doesn't mean their transgression didn't happen. The price to be paid was the transgression. And chapter 13 acts as a bookend to chapter 1. Josh McDowell recounts more of his early testimony and how trusting in Jesus profoundly influenced his life. The book ends with an extensive references appendix that supports many of its claims. More Than a Carpenter is a great book if you have been looking for a strongly reasoned foundation for your faith, or if you want a brief introduction to the history of Christianity. If you enjoy it, I would also recommend Cold Case Christianity by Jim Warner Wallace.